Today we're going to talk about scatter plots. A scatter plot is a collection of points on a graph representing two variables. When we talk about scatter plots, we often refer to the correlation. Correlation is just the relationship between the two variables. There's three different types of correlation. We have positive, negative, and no correlation. In a positive correlation, it's kind of like having a positive slope. Y increases as X increases. In a negative correlation, it's kind of like negative slope. Y decreases as X increases. And in no correlation, notice the points are kind of all over the place. The X and Y values are just random. There's really no relationship between them. So for example, we can make this scatter plot. It just has a bunch of points that we're going to put on this graph and describe the correlation. So 1, 3, graph that one here. 1.51. When you have 0.5, just go halfway between 1 and 2. 2, 1. 2, negative 0.5. Again, it's just halfway between when it's 0.5. 3, negative 1. And hopefully we're beginning to see this correlation. 3.5, negative 0.5. And our last point is 4, negative 2. So if we look at all of these points in general, they are going down. This is a negative correlation. Okay. Next, we need to know how to make a prediction equation from a scatter plot. And thankfully, Desmos is a great tool for us that will help us with this and make our lives a little bit easier. So the steps for getting this equation would first be to graph on Desmos. And we can do that by using the plus button to get a table. I'll show you that in just a moment. After we graph it, then we would copy the graph onto our paper. We use the equation y sub 1 and then this little squiggle symbol mx sub 1 plus b to get what's called the line of best fit. It's called the line of best fit because it's the line that best fits all of the data, meaning it kind of goes in the middle of all of the points. That will give us that equation. We just write it down, and then we can use this equation to make future predictions. Okay, so if we look at this example, I'm going to take this table and copy it onto Desmos. So we go to desmos.com, and it looks like this. We click this blue button that says Graphing Calculator, and it gives us a blank graph to work with. So on our notes, we needed to enter all of these numbers in a table. So there's this plus sign right here. We can add a table, and then I can just copy all of the numbers from our table. Then once we have all of those points, we can see on the graph here, and sometimes if we have big numbers and I won't be able to see, we can use this magnifying glass and it will zoom it to show all of our points. This one we can see has a negative correlation. we're going to find the equation. So we're going to do this y sub 1 squiggle mx sub 1 plus b to get our equation. So on Desmos, I type in y, and you can just put the number 1. It automatically goes down as a subscript. And then to get that squiggle, if you look on your keyboard on your computer, it is to the left of the number 1, right below escape. You're going to have to hit shift, that button, to get the squiggle. M, X, again, just type 1 and it automatically brings it down, plus B. So we see it gives us this nice line that goes kind of in the middle of our points. It gives us some information down here. What we want to look at is the M and the B. Those are familiar to us, the slope and the y-intercept. From those two, we can write our equation, y equals mx plus b. It gives us a lot of decimals. We don't need to put all of those decimals. Usually we'll just say round to 1 decimal, the tenths place. If you want to put 2, that would certainly be fine. So in this case, we would copy our equation and put y equals mx plus b. Our m we see is this negative 1.24615. We don't need all of that. We can put just negative 1.2 x, and then we have plus b, and in this case our b is this. We can just say that is negative 0.7. This is our equation of the line of best fit. We can use this to make predictions. It doesn't ask us to make any predictions on this particular example, so we are done after we find this equation. We have one more example, and this one will have us do some predictions. We can skip this part because Desmos is finding the points and slope for us. We don't need to do that. Okay, so the very first thing we need to do is copy this table onto Desmos. Notice on the x-axis, it has years since 2000. So the year 2000 is actually year 0. We don't have to type in 2000 and 2001. We just put 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. So we go back to Desmos, and we're going to just X out of our previous one. It's easier than having to delete each one. And if you try to make a new table with your previous equation, it doesn't work because it will say x2 and y2, and that doesn't connect with what our equation says. So just make sure you X out of everything to start a new one. And now we're just going to copy over our numbers. Remember, 2000 would just be 0. If we go back to Desmos, I don't see any of those points here because these numbers are much larger. So that's where our magnifying glass down here would be handy to see all of the points. We see this is a positive correlation, and we need to find the equation. So I go ahead and enter in and you guys will not have to memorize this. We'll give that to you and it'll be on your notes and you can use that during any tests. We need to look at M and B again. So our prediction equation would be y equals 32 notice it is 32.35, so we can round that to 32.4, and x plus 469.9. So now that we have our prediction equation, we can actually make predictions using this. So it says predict the average attendance for this year's basketball season. So this all is about attendance at basketball games. So the year, remember, was the year since 2000. So we would use 20 for this year, 2020. And that is the x value in our table is the year. So we're going to take this equation and I'm going to copy it. The only thing we need to change is the x value, and I'm going to put 20 in for the x value. And you can either put this into a calculator, or Desmos is also a calculator, so I can just add another line here and type in 32.4 times 20 plus 469.9, and it calculates it for us. That's about 1,118. So I would put for our answer over here 1,118 people would attend the game this year following that pattern. Then it says predict in which year the average attendance will be approximately 900 people. So this one's a little bit more difficult. We're going to take this same equation and copy it down here. But this time, the 900 people is the y value, the attendance. So we're going to change the y to 900. And then we have an equation to solve. And we've solved these equations before. We first need to subtract 469 from both sides. We can use Desmos for a calculator again if we want to. 900 minus 469.9 is 430.1. And I bring down 32.4x. Last step would be to divide by 32.4. Again, we can use Desmos to calculate that. We get 13.27. And this is talking about a year, so this would just be about 13 or 2013. So with scatter plots, we can graph them by hand. Sorry, I skipped that on here. But we can graph them by hand, we can graph them on Desmos, we can get the equation from Desmos, and we can use that equation to plug in for either x or y, predicting things that could happen if it follows that pattern.